Right. Thanks everybody for coming along. My name is Max Boykoff. I'm the director of this center. I just put into your hands, we have a great seminar series lined up for this fall. 3 of our, I think, 9 talks are co-hosted by the Benson Center for the Study of Western Civilization. So those should be particularly interesting. Today, to start off our first talk, we are lucky to have Bernadette Woods-Placky with us. And Bernadette is an amazing boundary spanner. I've been a meteorologist, where was it? In Baltimore?
Yeah, most of my time is Baltimore, but before that was Lexington, Kentucky, and Fayetteville, Arkansas.
That's great. So now she's working with Climate Central as the chief...
Officially chief meteorologist, but you know, in NGO we do a lot of things.
Okay. So we had the chance to have her along with her schedule, which is a wonderful opportunity for us. She is definitely a boundary spanner that helps work. She's been working on a project for a number of years, helping weathercasters better understand and helpfully articulate climate change through broadcasts. So that'll be basically the subject of her talk. And as a new tradition that we have here in the center, before I turn it over to Bernadette, I just want to acknowledge that the University of Colorado Boulder sits on the land within the territories of the Ute, the Cheyenne, and the Arapaho peoples, and further acknowledging that 48 contemporary tribal nations are historically tied to the lands that make up the state of Colorado. So thank you all again very much for coming. Thank you, Bernadette.
Thank you.
Okay.
How are you guys doing today? Yeah. Love being out here. It's a great town we live in. So, like you said, I'm Bernadette. I'll give you a little bit of my background, and then I'm going to talk through, there's so many ways to communicate climate change, so many ways to communicate, about connecting with people and how to do that. And so I'm going to take you through some of what we do at Climate Central and our ways of approaching this. Again, not the only ways to do this, but a little bit of a case study is what we're going to do. So my background getting into all of this, started at Penn State Meteorology, and then from there, became an operational forecaster for about 15 years. First at AccuWeather, then getting into the television rounds, which is one of those things I never thought I did, and then I did. And we went through the towns I worked in, and then from there, I got this opportunity to work at Climate Central. And really the tie in all of that is, I spent my entire career really at the mix of science and communications. And over that span, one of the things that really drove me into going into television, even though I didn't think I would, was we started to understand what the atmosphere can do and how it can harm people. At least for me, I felt this real need to help get that information out to the public. And that's one of the things that's really tied over to communicating climate change, because we're seeing those things on bigger and larger and longer scales. So it's really how it's drawn all of this together. Now at Climate Central, Todd worked with us for a little bit there, so that's why we were just chatting up here. We were started in 2008 as an organization to really bridge that gap between science and the public. We'd come so far in our understanding of how the climate was changing, and the science was so clear on the fundamental level. And as many people study this, how was that not getting out to the public? So this is one of the avenues to try and get that information out to the public. And over the years, we've really taken on a range of projects and programs, but we've really maintained the same mission the whole time, is to get that information out to the public, create an informed society about what is going on. Now here's a snapshot of some of the programs we've really done over those years. Sea Level Rise, our Surging Seas program. I know we're not on the coasts right here, but it's a pretty robust sea level rise program with mapping tools, a lot of cool visuals and projections in the United States, also globally. And on top of that, if you dive into the tool, it's overlaid with all the census data, so you can really analyze the risk level of sea level rise going forward. That program is still up and running, and we've got a really big paper coming out soon updating some of the global sea level rise mapping tools to show what's going on there. So that'll be interesting. We had a journalism program that was more daily journalism when it first started. It's morphed over the years. No one was really writing about climate change during 2008 on a regular basis. So we decided to start doing that. Now at this point, we've really taken our entire organization and tried to take this global issue and make it personal and local where we can. So the way we've morphed our journalism program is to do some co-production stories where we partner with local outlets across the country to help infuse that science into the storytelling and really pull out those good stories of why you should care, how this is impacting you, how this is affecting your community, and what can be done about it. World Weather Attribution was a program we started a few years ago. We were part of. We are no longer part of it, but for those who have followed extreme event attribution science, actually I should probably back that up. Some people probably didn't follow extreme event attribution science. Sometimes talk, to some science people, so they already know. But it's where the science has advanced so much that we can look at any individual extreme weather event and tease out the role that climate change played in that event. And we can see how much more likely, how much bigger, how much stronger. There's different levels of science to this. A lot more confidence, obviously, in heat events. Pretty high confidence in extreme precipitation events. Starts to drop off from there, but it's fascinating on the scientific front. And not that long ago, the narrative was really, you can't attribute any one event to climate change. Well, we helped really push that narrative forward along with this larger group. And it is a global collection of people, Red Cross, Red Crescent, KNMI in the Netherlands, and also Oxford in England. Now they've continued on with that, and they're still taking on these attribution studies, notably some of the ones about the European heat wave, and really showing how it was not possible to get to that extreme level without climate change. So that is one of the programs we've worked on over the years. Research, and this is what Todd helped us with when he was with it, that's really morphed. It's not a standalone program anymore, but it backs a lot of what we do in our analysis of things. And Climate Matters in the Newsroom are the ones I particularly work on, so I'm going to spend most of the time talking about it. And as Max started to say, Climate Matters is the program where we partner with TV meteorologists to really get out this information about climate change. And take you back a little bit on this one here. So we've got this video I'm going to show. It's kind of a snapshot of where we've come. And then I'll take you back on how this started and some of the progressions along the way.
There's an unmistakable trend here. No matter what snow we get, it will melt faster than years past. Climate change and more warm air making its way with moisture and causing bigger storms.
Above normal days during springtime has nearly doubled. It in particular has seen a 55% change.
Sobre el área de Denver, que la temperatura lentamente.
For every 1 degree increase, the air can hold 4% more water vapor. An increase in these hot days in the summer.
The line gradually increasing.
Part of our warming climate where the summers are getting warmer.
The increase in the number of smoky days that are expected can lead to higher pollen levels.
The change in pattern of diseases spread by insects such as mosquitoes.
Those turbines, we also create a lot of job opportunities.
Churches, synagogues, all across the country are now enjoying the benefits of tapping into the sun.
La energía solar, eso evita la contaminación.
Then it gets into a little more about Climate Central, but you got the gist of it there. So that's a snapshot of where we come. Now, to take you back a little bit on this program, it was started with this concept that TV meteorologists are in a very unique position. In many cases, they are the only scientists that the public ever connects with on a regular basis or even knows. They have these dedicated audiences. They keep coming back to them, even if the forecast is wrong. And trusted messengers in their communities. They really resonate with the people in their communities. They live in their communities. And like I said, scientists, skilled communicators they take these complex equations of how the atmosphere works and tell you if it's going to rain, if you're going to have thunderstorm or hail, what it's going to be. And extreme weather is how so many people experience climate change. So they're really on the front lines of bringing this message forward. That was the thought process in the very beginning. However, when the project launched, and the first survey was done of the TV meteorology community, only about 54% of TV meteorologists were convinced the climate was changing. And that was just in 2010, 2011, so not that long ago. Well, we've come a long way since. This was our first Climate Matters meteorologist. He's infamous in our world, Jim Gandy in Columbia, South Carolina. And Jim decided to take this project on. His whole station, his news director were completely behind this. They were so ready for so much pushback and just anger from their community. And to hear Jim explain it, he does so much more justice than me, but he's like, I'm not from a red state. I am from a maroon state. I am from a very conservative state. But our project, which was the collaboration of us, George Mason University, AMS, NASA, NOAA, Yale, did a lot of work around this. Produced the packages, a series of packages for him to air in Columbia, South Carolina about how this is affecting them. Then on top of that, Ed and his team at George Mason did some pre-surveying work of TV audiences in Columbia. Then after the year of all of this, he did another survey. And we learned that over the course of the year, people who watched Jim were interested and became more informed about climate change. It worked. And they heard from a couple of people, but not nearly what they were expecting. They said what they started hearing more and more was people asking them questions. Well, does this affect us? Does this harm us? So they really wanted to learn more. And this is in Columbia, South Carolina. So that's where this all started. Then from there, in 2012, when that project really wrapped up, Climate Central went out and made it a full-time program. One of the first in that batch was Mike Nelson here in Denver. And it was kept small intentionally at first because we wanted to make sure we could actually do it and deliver. Because we decided not just to do a handful of packages, but to do weekly. Because the concept was repeated message. Okay, I'm gonna get started. This is Ed's got like this tattoo on him, basically. Simple messages, repeated often by trusted messengers. And to get those repeated often, we had to get people up and running and using this stuff. And we had to get enough stuff up to really get them up to speed on where the science was and ways they could apply this to what was going on in their world. So we started rolling it out to people. Then in 2014, we got another NSF grant. We were able to start Spanish translation. We were able to really start scaling things up. And since then, to this day, we are now at 770 TV meteorologists, a snapshot across the country, in 180 markets, and we produce for 244 cities every single week when we produce our content, because we try to localize when possible. I'll show you. For perspective, there are about 2,200 TV meteorologists in the U.S., to give you a sense of where we are, and there are 210 primary media markets. We have a handful of extra cities, because like New Jersey, where I live, doesn't have a primary media market. It's Philly and it's New York City. So we've got Atlantic City in there. So we've got a couple of extra cities we added in along the way. And in this process, it took a while to get going. The barriers, I think, were not fully understood for the people that launched this project. I came in 2013, and it was into that world of only 54% thinking the climate was changing. So there's a lot of work done in the beginning with this community on understanding where the science is. Todd joined us at some conferences. We had standalone workshops. We had, at the major conferences, the American Meteorological Society, the National Weather Association, had sessions there, webinars, and gave the meteorologists a chance to connect with the scientists about what was really going on, ask the questions that were in their mind. And we started breaking down those barriers. Then getting to a point of how you can apply this to what you're doing and actually talk about it. So in the beginning, there was not a ton of people in the program. There's not a ton of TV use. But it's really started to take off in the past couple of years. And just through July, we've already surpassed last year's numbers. And our August was kind of through the roof. We put out a couple of things that just people really resonated with it. And we'll do some of these mini reports, and it was about extreme heat in sports. And I mean, the use on that was just incredible. There was an example at CNN, actually had their sportscaster and their meteorologist, and it came via their health person to get to them. So we're like, this is just so perfect. This is what we want. It doesn't have to be in this silo. It's, people bringing this into their ways of life. So that's how far we've come. Now, again, we have a long way to go. We're aware of that. Yeah.
What does the TV hit mean?
So define that. Sure. A unique audience. So if they bring it into their weathercast and they air it, say, 2 or 3 times that day, that would be 2 or 3 hits. So, sorry, get a little jargony, so thank you. So again, we've come a long way, but we have a long way to go. We're very, very aware of it. So how do we do this? How do we approach this? Now, from our side, like I said, there's a larger team. Ed does a lot of the social science and survey work at George Mason. We've got a whole crew working with us, climate communication. We do trainings, we do workshops. From our side at Climate Central, we hone in on the science first and foremost always. We are a non-political group. We're not going to go there. We try to start all of our storytelling with something scientific that is going on in the world. Then we can pull the stories out of it. We localize whenever possible, because this is this global issue, but you feel it personally. So you want to connect with people on a personal level. Make it simple and clear. If we can't break down the headlines, the messaging, into a very simple message, we're not going to put it out, because that means that these meteorologists aren't going to be able to say it easily and simply to their audience. And I'm sure Todd remembers some. I mean, every week this is a weekly battle almost, where it's how far can we push some of the communications but still stay true to the science, because that is who we are. And it's really fun, but it is one of those things we're constantly working on. We operate on a news cycle. We don't operate in the sense of, there's a really cool research report about snow that came out in July. Like, we're not going to put that out. We will hold it and do something in January. So we try to stay with or ahead of the news schedule. Now, from the weather side, I am a forecaster, as is one of my colleagues, so we can do that. But also, big events going on. For example, we just put out this huge package today that guides you through all of our resources on how you can tell these stories with this whole onslaught of September events coming up in the climate change world. From the Covering Climate Now initiative, to Climate Week, to the Climate Summit, to the Climate Strike, to Clean Energy Week. Like, there's just all this stuff coming up. So we want to help support that, getting it out enough time that people can plan and prepare for that. So that's how we do it. I mean, we connect with, there's really cool sciencey topics we want to get out, but we know people aren't going to go there unless they have a good news hook to do that with. So we'll hold things for that. A lot of the oceans things we'll release on World Oceans Day or some big event like that. So we're always looking for those strong news hooks. One of the more popular ones, and I'll show you in a minute, was our beer one, our beer analysis. And we put it out for St. Patrick's Day. It was great because it was just like, so many TV meteorologists were like, since it's St. Patrick's Day, they're going to talk about beer. So it's just finding those strong news hooks and being able to connect with them. That's so critical. Produce the content on a weekly basis, multiple formats, English and Spanish. So that is something we do internally. Now, I'm going to give you a snapshot of some of what we do. And it's a whole host. I mean, we have years of this stuff bookmarked, and I'll show you the link where you can find that. But I'll take you through just a couple of examples. Clearly, we do a lot of work with weather, regular weather, extreme weather, all of it because we started with TV meteorologists. We're branching out to journalists more, which I'll show you in just a moment. But we have a ton of weather stuff that you can take a snapshot of here. Here's an example. Heat, we'll take a cut of what is an extremely hot day in an area, and then a trend of that. And obviously that temperature is going to vary. 110 in Phoenix, 75 in San Francisco. The less extreme cold, this is our polar vortex approach. This is one when everyone was standing on the side of the lake in Chicago, like it was the worst thing that ever happened, and it was cold. I'm not saying it wasn't cold, it was very cold. But that used to happen. That used to happen a lot more. And they were all gone when it hit a record high 5 days later. So it's trying to put those things in perspective. When we send it out, we package it with the science, links to other information, methodologies, the narrative, all that stuff, so that they can help tell the story. This is just annual rainfall trends. This isn't even extreme ones. We've done a ton with heavy rainfall too. And just sort of an overview for a lot of people who are getting into hurricane coverage. What are the lakes? We were getting those questions, so we decided to answer them. Oh, there we go. So sometimes, this is what I love too. Oh, this isn't that plan. Let me see if I can get it to go. It's just fun with numbers, is this bottom one here. You know, we took a snapshot of summer last year. It was one of those where there was just a lot of heat everywhere. So we just, you know, did this cool GIF that people love on social media, and we were surprised how much it was used on television too. And then this one about that shift, I'm sure many of you have seen a version of this before. Sorry, covered it up there. Apologies about that. But it's that bell curve. It's geeky. A bell curve is geeky, but when you can highlight it with color and kind of guide people through what it meant, that a degree might not sound like much, but when you just a little change in that degree, how much that shifts our capacity for that extreme heat. So that is one of those things that can help guide you through those stories. Here's another fun project we had done. It was a couple people have come out with this lately, so I'm glad to see it's getting updated even. I mean, the models haven't updated quite yet, the big global models, it's coming soon, but so this is still up to speed. But what we did is we took an average summer temperature for a location. Here's 85, so just 85.5 there, and then we projected that out to 2100 and matched it with a city that currently has that summer high temperature. And when we went through this project, that's another one of those where you're like, you just took average annual temperature, didn't mean anything. Or if you took an average summer temperature, didn't mean anything. So we brought it down to like a high, because 85 means something to someone. When you see 85, you can connect with it. And then did that matching. We had so much fun doing this, we did a global one too, which was really fun. In like Paris, France is going to Fez, Morocco.
Is that really 11 degrees? It was suggested, the last slide it just said it.
For the summer high temperature?
Hotter by, yeah, is that what they suggested?
And of course, not all warming is uniform.
Yeah.
Not all warming in seasons and space and stuff like that. But when we were able to downscale this, a summer high temperature in Denver is going up about.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. And see, good, it had impact. That's the whole point. That's good. And so when we did this internationally, we did this project with the World Meteorological Organization. And we worked with some international TV weather presenters, and we had about a dozen of them roll out a video with this. And this is so cool, because media is so different all over the world, and you get to see the different ways they approach things. And it was great, because one of our meteorologists in Belgium, they were going to somewhere in Spain, and she was able to connect with another meteorologist we know in Spain, and they did like a talk back of what that's going to be like in the future. We had an Eastern European one, and it was very dark, dramatic. And we had someone in Japan, and it starts with like a bow and like little anime on the bottom. Yeah. So it's just really cool to see how people bring this out from the same data set. And so that's where the story idea begins, and then people can apply it to what they're doing.
Bernadette,
yeah.
Are you willing to take questions as you go?
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, the 10.9 is kind of on the upper end
yes.
of the range, right? And so it might feel a little bit more dramatic. How do you address that when you're talking about these ranges of expected warming?
So
maybe the accusation that you're
going extreme?
Yeah.
So I don't know who all here are scientists not. And there's, when you look at the models, they have these sort of 4 different pathways. And the upper one is the one that's the extreme one, that's the top one. The thing is though, that's the path we're on for the most part. I know there have been some bumps recently, but generally speaking, that's the path we're on right now. And people were like, oh, you're just trying to make it worse. At the time, there was the bottom path at this point in time is so unrealistic right now that we didn't think that scientifically that was fair to even put out. Because it's almost like a false message. Because for that to happen, fundamentally, we have to change so much about our emissions and take it out of the air. So that we didn't want to go with that one. That's why we went with the one that scientifically we were tracking on. But it is the extreme path. And they're about to update all the global models like in the next year, and they're adding some intermediate paths. Go ahead.
Can I just add? So it's tricky because you have one graphic, 10 seconds to talk about it. Mm-hmm. When we do the broader reports, Bernadette said when they now provide a lot of supporting material with the packages that go out. And you do talk about that there are multiple scenarios and they say different things. It's just, when you have a very limited amount of time, they've made the decision to I think Justified would talk about the high emissions scenario.
And those are big internal conversations.
Yeah, we always had those conversations about what to show. Should we show one of the mid-range?
So let me show you for the global one, this was an interactive, this was not a TV graphic. Now, you design differently for different mediums too. TV, people are gonna go back and rewind and read and, so it has to be clear in a couple of seconds. You have to guide the viewer through it. Strong headlines, all of that. This is an online interactive. So people can play and go back and forth. So in this one, we did 2 different emission scenarios. We did the 8.5 and the 4.5. And so the 4.5 is still a hopeful one, but it's not completely out of the question yet. So if I was I'm not on the internet, I'd show you. You can go into here, and then what about moderate emissions cuts? And then it'll show you that it goes to like the south of France or part of Spain. So it can show you that range in between. And it is an interesting communications tool because people look at it differently. Some people look at that as the hopeful approach to say, well, you still have a choice. But then on one hand, it's those choices aren't good. They're both warm, really warm. But that gives you a sense of what we're looking at, so you can try and understand it.
It also raises a question about the scenarios that the models use in comparison to what's reality. Why would they choose more conservative scenarios if the more extreme scenario is the realistic one?
Well, and you can jump into this too. This is it. When they were first put out, it wasn't completely out of the question. It was still going to take a lot of emissions cuts really quickly. But what we're doing is just accumulating so quickly and accelerating that as everything is changing, that one's dropping off. So the next round that comes out, I'm pretty sure they're still keeping that low one, but it shows you what you could do if you took a massive amount of carbon out of the atmosphere. So it shows you that range, and it's still going up. We don't just hit weather. We try to hit other things because climate change is affecting so much in our lives. Here's an analysis we did with mosquito days. We just took an equation we found in the literature that was based on temperature and moisture. We're able to do that trend for all of our cities across the U.S. where we work in, and to show that change in mosquito season. Poison ivy, this is one of Jim Gandy's favorites, so I carry it forward. It's about one of the things that loves CO2 in this world is our weeds. They're sucking it up, and they're becoming stronger too as far as poison ivy goes. Smoke wave days, much more of a Western issue than an Eastern one, as you guys know. But this was someone else's research that we were able to work with, and that's the other thing too, is we'll do some work, but if there's really good research going out there that we're trying to connect with a timely topic, we've worked with so many wonderful scientists over the years, like, hey, can we use this? Are we representing it accurately? All of that, because we want to get this information out because we think it's so powerful. Another one is longer growing seasons, so longer time without a freeze. We're seeing longer allergy seasons, and we've worked with Ziska on that stuff a lot. And this is, like I was saying, the beer. But these are all sort of ways of life that are being impacted. An Eagles fan there. And we did this huge research project our sea level rise team did with Zillow about coastal house construction, like new home construction, that are in current risk zones right now. The power of trees, this is how we connected with last year's fall foliage. We've done some work on that in the past, and we're like, we just love trees, we just love trees. We found this great data set to really break it down city by city on the power of trees and what they can do, how much they suck out of the air, what they do to help with flood prevention, all of that. This is, again, like I'm just giving you guys a snapshot here, and we can ask questions away. This is a new project that has been sort of a passion project of mine that I'm super excited about. Sort of the next push with the TV meteorologist is, think about it, as we advance our solar and our wind capacity, that's weather, right? So trying to get TV meteorologists to start bringing in a wind or solar forecast into their daily weather report. They do pollen reports. I mean, they do boating reports, they do hiking reports. So it's like a wind or a solar report. And this is a massive project, more behind the scenes than the flashy, pretty things you see in front of your screen. And what we were able to do is work with this group, Mezzo. They're a forecasting company, a lot of weather data in Albany, New York. And we took their weather API and paired it with an API of current installations of wind and solar that are out right now. And then we took that data, aggregated across the entire market area, which comprises multiple counties, like Denver, all the counties that comprise the Denver market area. And then it spits out the numbers of what was generated yesterday was forecast for today, was forecast for tomorrow. And since this, we're about to roll out a whole lot of extra fun metrics, like how many cell phones that powers, and, just different communications tools, because people resonate and connect with different things. So you want to try and give options for people to try and get this information out. And then as all of this has built up, we've gotten another National Science Foundation grant to work more broadly with media and journalists. And this is what we've called Climate Matters in the Newsroom, and this is a reason why. So I'm sure many of you have seen this, but if you haven't, these are the Yale Climate Opinion Maps. It's the research that George Mason and Yale does twice a year for the past 10 plus years. And they've been able to put it into this really cool database that this is such a cool tool to go in and explore. You can look at people's views and opinions on climate change on a number of different topics. You can break it down in a number of different ways, and you can see what people really think about these subjects. So this is where people are with climate change. Snapshot. And you see most of the country is convinced the climate is changing. The numbers start to drop off on human causation, on will it harm me personally, all of that. But this is just appalling to me. Look at the numbers for people that hear about global warming in the media at least once a week. 20-ish%. I mean, that is wild. This is arguably the biggest subject in our entire lives, and people aren't talking about it. So, and not on the scales we need to. I mean, in pockets we are, but we need to get this out there more. So this is really the impetus of trying to work with the broader media at this point. And we're about 2 years into this grant now. The first year was a lot of survey work with the reporter and journalism community. What are views, opinions, barriers? Overwhelmingly convinced the science is happening at this point, but trying to identify what barriers we can help break down for them, what resources they need, the lack of time they have to prepare things, what are the topics they want to cover, things like that. Doing a ton of workshops, webinars. We're going to be back here next month at Society of Environmental Journalists is having a big conference in Fort Collins in October. It's a really engaged group. And really just helping bring this subject matter out. So with this group, these are our partners still, Climate Communication Center for Climate Change Communication at George Mason, NASA, NOAA, always, then we have a handful of media partners, some of the real media societies, like I said, SEJ, there's a whole bunch of them. Do we have any media specific people? Because I'll go through them. Okay. And here's a snapshot of the type of stuff we're doing there. So when I say we put out a package, here's an idea of what it looks like. And I know you can't read all of that, but there's a lot of stuff there. And that's what I'm trying to show you with this. We give interview opportunities, people who are experts on the topic that we're putting out have agreed to be interviewed for this, made themselves available. We give ideas of how you can find a local interview, suggestions, on a topic like this. We were talking about extreme heat, we were getting into health, we were getting into sports. So ideas of the Roadrunners Association, and there's this center at University of Connecticut, the Corey Stringer Institute, after Corey Stringer, the football player who had died from heat, the Minnesota Vikings. So they started this whole research center, and they have all these on-the-ground experts in different locations across the country. So helping to pull those kinds of things out to help people have the tools they need to tell these stories. The other thing that's really just been fundamental in all of this is the guide that this is a story they can tell. A lot of times they're just afraid where they should go with this story. And these are those moments of, oh, this is a story, yeah, I got this, I can do this. So it's that process that we're working through too, and just trying to break it down into the components and the resources they've said they wanted. So we're very much in contact. We consider it a partnership working with everyone, and we try to respond to them. And here are a couple examples of just what we've seen over the past, say, 2 months or so. And it's those local reporters who are thrown into these stories and don't always have the time or the resources to jump into this that we're really trying to connect with. See, report shows wildfires and heat stoking Salt Lake City ozone problem. Young athletes in greater danger as Kansas City sees more hot summer days. Summer 2019 was one of the Toledo's hottest. We've got Texas Climate News. Yes, they are really hotter and more humid than 40 years ago. And there was a partnership journalism project we had done with Sacramento Bee about prescribed burns with wildfires. And that was new research that was coming out from a scientist that we worked with together and helped get that story out as she was releasing her research. And this is where we store all of this. If you guys, I mean, this is free public use. Anyone can use it. You can sign up and get this stuff yourself. We want people to look at this stuff and use this stuff. Medialibrary.climatecentral.org. It's a little bit of a clunky website. It's resource dependent. We're trying to update our website this year. But you can search. You can search for years of stuff that we've done, and locally by market or city specific too. And to sign up to get this stuff, Get Climate Matters right there. That's a spot. Just go in, put in Denver, you'll get the information. So some of our lessons learned during this process that for all of us, regardless of what we're doing, we need to communicate in our lives, that I just kind of wanted to leave you with. Know your audience. You hear that all the time is the golden rule of communication. But there's so much to unpack from that. Know your audience in topic. What do they like? What resonates with them? Know them in tone. What level of science do they understand or don't understand? When I started out TV with weather, I worked with this guy in Philly, and he would say, "Stop, no one talks like that." Like, I understood what those terms meant. He's like, "But nobody does. Nobody does." So it's great when you can throw big terms around. That's great when you're with people that understand those. But you gotta break them down for people who don't. And you have to assume that most people don't understand those. And that's not a bad thing. I get very frustrated when people call it dumbing down, because it's not. It takes incredible skill to dissect something so complex into simple words. Timing. That's what I'm saying. Like, we're not going to put snowfall out in the winter unless there's some freak snowstorm and we wanted to look at something. But try and connect the timing of things too. Meet people where they are. Now, if it was just knowledge of the subject matter, we would have solved the climate issue already. So people are only going to go so far. How can you meet them to bring the information that's valuable to them into that conversation? Personalized, localized. It is a global issue. But people care about their families, their communities, things that are their ways of life that really resonate with them. You know, if you're in Minnesota, you ice fish. That's a big part of your life. You're not just going to freeze over lakes. That's not just possible. Like, you can manufacture snow for a certain amount of time at certain ski resorts, but certain areas you can't do that. And tell a story if you're in the position to do so. You know, people really connect with storytelling. So those are some things I just wanted to leave you with here too. And again, there's so many ways to do this. You have to find what works for you and whatever audience you're working with, whether it's something formal or whether it's at a party and people just have questions. But these are two images that really resonate with me. And this is another way to tell stories. And again, they don't resonate with everyone, but these are powerful to me. So here's that snapshot of, this is our atmosphere. You know, being a meteorologist, the atmosphere means a lot to me. But that's it. That's all. When you look out from the world, like, that little thin layer is the difference between life on this planet and not. And that is what we're changing. And the other one that really resonates with me is, it is personal. It's about people and what we're doing and the people that we love and the things that we love. So those are things to remember when you bring the subject to anyone on any different level. So that's what I got to say. I'm open to your questions. You know, reach out now or anytime.
So thanks so much, Bernadette. I think in a group like this, it could be best just to directly call on people and have questions. I don't think I need to mediate that. I certainly have questions. But
sure,
please.
I already saw a hand go.
So I love the direct outreach. I'm a risk communicator too. Do you guys have a branch that is reaching out to policymakers?
You know, we're a non-policy group. We're strictly non-policy. People that come to us, we answer questions. I mean, I spoke to senators. I mean, a lot, but I went into my talk saying, I'm not here to talk about policy nor politics. I'm here to talk about the science and how to communicate that. I mean, that's where we draw the line. And we work with people that do. So we're very willing to supply information and work with the people who are doing that, but that's our kind of bridge. It also allows us to work with media more.
I was going to mention that since this is a policy center, that was one of the biggest challenges I think we faced is that when I would do a media interview or whatever, the solution side would always come up, the policy, what do we do? And as Bernadette said, we were non-policy advocacy. But we kept hearing that people wanted to know more about solutions and what they could do. We did a pilot project in Missouri, and what came out is that people there, they wanted to know what was coming and what they could do about it. They cared less about what the heat trends were over the past 5 decades. So that was always a challenge for us, is trying to straddle that line of being policy relevant, but not endorsing policy.
Yeah, not prescriptive.
And that's very challenging.
And it is. Now, where I go with that is when there's technologies and science about some of the solutions, that's fair game. Like wind and solar, with a lot of the agriculture and the soil work. Like there's a lot that can help support that to inform communities. And again, for people making decisions, there are a ton of decision makers who use our sea level rise tool because there's a lot of information in there. And they're welcome to. And they come and ask us questions about it. Citizens Climate Lobby trains some of their people on our Surging Seas tool. So that is, it is all out there for anyone. It's just that's not our avenue. And there are limitations in that when you want to solve everything right away. But it also opens up a whole new door of other people you can work with.
I met you before.
Yeah, we met at the AMS.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah, coming from NCOM. So I read a study recently that was very depressing as a communicator who works with climate scientists, and it found that climate scientists were the least trusted messengers about climate change as compared to like political leaders and members of the military, and that was among like both political parties. So I was curious if you all know about where meteorologists stand in that, being not climate scientists, and having these audiences and a different, role.
It's interesting because that has changed, the scientist part. Because when Ed first did some of this, George Mason at Maybeck had done some of this research work before the project launched with the first National Science Foundation grant. This is one of the questions, or who are the trusted messengers on this? And the top at that time was climate scientists. But people's access to climate scientists is not very high. You guys have NCAR. Most people don't have NCAR in their community. So that's not the same. The second was friends and family. But do your friends and family understand fully what you're asking, And then the third was TV meteorologists. But it's jostled with some different positions. The scientists have come down a little bit. Military is high. And that, if I remember that study correctly, it was just trusted messengers in general, but not about this specific topic.
Yeah.
And so the military was like a trusted messenger on everything. Like they were way up there, still golden standard. Politicians were down.
If I could just jump in there too, Pew Center just had a study that came out about climate scientists. It was actually much more encouraging about that they are trusted. So that came out just a couple weeks ago.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen that.
That is good, because when this is about climate change specifically, and climate scientists were at the top. So.
But I think that was one of the main mission points of Climate Central, was to do the heavy lifting on the science and research and analytics side and get it distilled down to products that you could then put it into a trusted messenger's hands, and they could then communicate about it. So, what Bernadette was talking about was how you do that with broadcast meteorologists. We started looking at I did a project in Missouri, and it turned out that the agriculture sector was a big trusted messenger. So, local extension agents and people like that. So we started thinking about how do you get agriculture impact from climate change distilled down to the right form and then put it in the right hands. So.
And there's different trusted messages in different communities. There really are. So.
I'm really curious about a lot of the metrics that you shared. Like, has the percentage of the meteorologists who are convinced?
Oh my gosh, I totally missed that. You're right. I dropped the ball on that one because I was building up to it and forgot. Yeah. Yes, it's come forever long way. 2017 was our most recent, and it's 95%.
Wow.
So in my timeline, I Sorry, thank you for bringing that up.
Okay, whew,
But yeah, I mean, 95%. So like that work's done, like
Yeah.
we're there. I mean, there's still some people, but for the most part, we're there. With that part, it's getting the good stories and connecting in the best ways and trying to bring that storytelling out.
And have some of those messengers gotten, you mentioned that the one who sort of led the charge didn't get a lot of pushback. Have some of them across the country gotten pushback or sort of declined in the rate that they push this out for you guys, or is it?
It's
all
overwhelmingly
pretty
positive.
good?
I will
Yeah.
tell you one story that's not so positive, but overwhelmingly, there were so many stories. At our AMS conference, annual conference 2 years ago, we had a session about this, and it was like an hour and a half, and we cut it at 45 because I said, for discussion time, I said, there's so many of you in this room doing great work. I want to give you a chance to tell your story. We had this line. We were way after our cut, like it blew us away. We had like chills. And so many of them overwhelmingly said, I was scared.
Yeah.
But nothing happened. Like that was the theme that kept coming up. And then people were talking to each other and they're like, oh, well, if your news director said this, you should say that. And boom, boom. I mean, it was a big group. This is not a small room. And one guy in Bryant, Texas, I love his story. So we bring a lot of the meteorologists on our panels when we do our sessions. We always try to have some of them as like, to tell their story, because there's so many of them in different places. All their stories are different. They're finding their own voice, and we want to hear about their voice. And he said, the first time we did it, I was like, I was so scared. Like, oh, what are people going to say? So I said something, I didn't hear it. Did I do a bad job? Like, did I not explain it well? And then, it's like, okay, I tried again. Did again, not much. Like, one thing here or there, good and bad, like, but nothing. To start bringing it in a little bit more, and then he was off during some big event. And he got emails saying, was there a climate change connection to that because you weren't on tonight? And he's like, they were listening. And if you look at Ed's research work of how America is, he has this research called, well, him and Tony, both at Yale and George Mason University, it's the 6 Americas of global warming. And it breaks down the 6 categories. The dismissive, the ones that you're not going to move but have the loudest voice are 9%. That's it. So if you're catering to them, you're missing 90-some% who are open to the conversation at various levels. And if you think about it, that brings me back to, I don't know how many of you used to watch Jon Stewart, but when he had his rally to restore sanity, and like their whole impetus behind that was, most of us are tired, and we're bringing our kid here, and then we're making lunches. We don't have time to follow through on these things that we think we should. That's most people are not going to reach out to you and be like, oh, that was a great job on that story. That's most of society that you're connecting with. And when I was on air, I heard way more about my outfits ever than something scientific I put out. So, I mean, that's the reality of where it is. So overwhelmingly, most have had positive feedback or not bad feedback. There was one guy in Mobile who, he's gotten it a little rough. Like people started, they came on a little strong. He's very seasoned, so he was fine. He let it just run. But there was another guy in Tennessee recently that had a hard time, but it's a really weird story because it's like the old news director got fired and he's the one that started this campaign against this guy. So it's almost like a bitter employee. I don't know enough details to go, but it just sounds odd, the story there. But most of them have had really good feedback.
Yeah, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's brilliant because in a way, the listeners are, we're not really a captive audience, but there's not an immediate way to sort of instantly give positive or negative feedback on these news stories that you hear from TV meteorologists. It's like you just absorb it, and it's a great opportunity for people. I hadn't thought about this. This is making me feel a lot more optimistic about your potential to change the world.
You had a question.
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking about the changing role of meteorologists, like Mike Nelson, just taking him as an example. His on-air time is so finite, and younger people are not watching broadcast television as much. But his Twitter presence is tremendous. So how has the job of Climate Central been changing with those times and staying ahead of that curve in terms of, countless school visits that he is an example.
He is
makes.
all over. He is all over.
You know, these are local celebrities.
Mhm.
I've had them into my classroom, and people who grew up in this area are just
And it's funny because so many people who are in like really in-depth jobs and high-level jobs, like, oh yeah, TV meteorologist, and they're like, oh my God, that's Mike, and you're like, yeah, that's the point. They carry a weight. They are trusted in their communities, and they do. Christiana Figueres, who used to run UNFCCC, when she would come to some of our international workshops, she's like, you're the sexy nexus between bringing information and coolness to something. And it is true. Now, the changing media landscape is legit. It is happening. Where it's going, nobody knows. It's how can you be nimble and adapt with that? I mean, some consultants will tell you where it's going, but there's a lot that's just changing. And local TV news is still king. Like all the numbers that come in, it is still the number one. It is losing its grip, but it is still overwhelmingly the number one way people consume news across America.
Is that across age groups too?
No, but no, well, yeah, overall,
So
yes. But when you break down, you can get different numbers, but overall, yes. It is still the number one way people consume their news. Now, when you dive in, it is heavily weighted to the older population, but overwhelmingly, it still is. Which does surprise some people who aren't engaged in that medium. Now, these people who are on TV of various levels have a huge online footprint, digital footprint. Like you said, the Twitter, the Facebook, the this and that. And it's a different conversation. You have time to engage more and do things differently with people. And we've always tried in our stuff, it's really good for social media shares too. We tried to build out some videos in social media and this and that. Like I said, that one was a gift that we just thought would be more social media driven. And people use it on TV also. So it's trying to work. We don't have enough resources to really feed every single source. So we design more for television because it is the one you can't adapt to as easily unless that is the initial design. It's a safe zone. That's why you see more room on the sides and the colors and the approach with the text and all of that. Like, you don't, in the beginning, people were doing some research stuff, like research reports, you see text written up. We're like, people on TV don't read science. So these kinds of things, then it's easier to design for TV and then apply it to other things. At times when we've had resources, we've really built out like online interactives and things like that. We don't quite have that capacity right now. We know it is different and gives different value to it, but we are trying to be aware and work with different mediums in different ways. And the media space is very aware of their changing landscape. And I've been going to a lot more media conferences and science ones recently, and there's a lot of talks about this, and a lot of focus on this, and some people still are afraid to change things, but then there's people trying to really insert innovation in new ways. And how can you think about, a lot of people when you're watching the game, you're doing it like this, and so how can you, through this, drive people to the television and back? Some of our morning people will say, this great new research just came out, quick, this is what's happening here. I have it all posted on my Facebook page, I'll answer questions there. Things like that. Like there's ways to do that. So it is changing, it is, but it is still number one.
So you mentioned that a lot of the meteorologists that you work with didn't get as much pushback from the viewing public. I'm curious about the stations or the ownership groups, whether that's been a point of resistance at all.
I think you're going to Sinclair. Are you?
Well, or I could say AccuWeather.
Okay, so AccuWeather doesn't really own stations.
Right.
So they give out forecasts and some stations buy that forecast.
Right.
They don't really have editorial say.
No, but it's media outlets.
Yes. We work with a lot of Sinclair meteorologists, and they haven't felt that anyone has attacked them to not do it. It is funny because one of the ones that we worked with, I don't know if anyone watches CBS like national news now, like morning news and stuff, but Jeff Bernadette, he used to work in Florida, and it was at a Sinclair station. And when I first started talking to him, he had this perception that he wasn't able to, but no one actually said that. And he's like, there's a lot of things going on in our world right now that are taking higher priority in their circle, that he's like, no one ever came to me and said, stop. So we've definitely worked with a lot of Sinclair people. You know, we try to approach it from, for the most part, from the individuals who want to do this. That's where the numbers started building. We have worked with some ownership groups since then. NBC, the owned stations, they're doing a tremendous amount of good work on this. Tremendous. And it's come down from the top. CBS is launching their local, not necessarily, I haven't seen this transition yet, but with this Covering Climate Now week that's coming up in a few weeks, another initiative to do more climate change reporting, being run by Columbia Journalism Review and The Nation, and CBS is committed to doing that. And so that is another sign. NBC as a whole, I mean, we have regular conversations with Al's team, Al Berger's team, every other week. And they're doing a whole lot more with this too. So that's on the national level, which has been lacking more than some of the local level. We talk with the Weather Channel regularly also. And what's coming up, what are some of the opportunities, that kind of a thing. So to help plan ahead. So the meeting I was just at last week is Excellence in Journalism. It's like RTDNA, which is Radio, Television, and Digital News Association, National Association of Hispanic Journalists, Society of Professional Journalists. And there's a lot of management there. And we had a manager on our panel. He's the news director in DC at the NBC station. And he had an awakening. He said, we're doing this. It's a branded series. He had me come, he had Ed come over. We had a session all day with their team, and he brought in his whole team. He brought in some of the key on-air people, but he brought in their sales manager. He brought in their community outreach lead. He brought in the whole crew. And they had the same questions about what happens at what. He's like, it'll be fun. It'll be fun. And he goes, it'll be fun, guys. We got this. And so he had a whole meeting with his whole newsroom, and they've really been interesting in their story because some of it's come in, well, they're doing the weather all the time, but they're doing a lot of news stories too. They kicked it off with a whole week of coverage around Earth Week, and they've been doing Changing Climate is what they branded it, because they had done this series in the past called Changing Minds after the Sandy Hook shooting. And they had taken on that. So they wanted to kind of play off that, and it's Changing Climate. They actually even surveyed their public, gave them a couple of options. They came up with that one. And so again, engaged in their audience. And he went, after he came up with this plan, they started this, he went to the NAB meeting, which is a really big one for the management. And he said, this is what we're doing. And he had a PowerPoint, and he pulled up those maps, those Yale maps, for all of the markets. And he goes, Dallas, look. He's like, and he started showing them all. He's like, you can do it too. See? Your people want to know. So we've really seen a lot of engagement from that side.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you guys.
This has been a great session. I'm sure people still may have comments and questions that they want to follow up on. You've got your contact information there. So please help me in again thanking Bernadette for a wonderful talk. Great. And thanks everybody for coming along. We got more talks